Welcome to another Only Jesus podcast with Tim Mullins. I'm sitting here with Pastor Eric Partin of Shoreline in Destin, Shoreline Church in Destin. Now, that's when people say that God's called you to Destin, Florida. That's how's that feel?
Well, we hear that all the time, and I'll hear church planners go, "Well, we were there on vacation, and we just feel like God's speaking us to go on to plant a church there." And I'm like, I bet He did, because I've heard that in Hawaii, I've heard it in Bali, I heard it in Australia, but we were actually returning to our roots. I was born and raised here, grew up here. So when God began to stir in our hearts to come back and start a church, it was really because I didn't want to be a senior pastor. I loved youth ministry, and I kind of said, I could see myself pastoring back in Destin, and that's where it ended up going.
Yeah, hometown.
So yeah, everybody else who came here and planted a church is because they just want to live in Destin. I have roots here. There was some purpose behind it. Everyone else, they just want to go to the beach.
So tell me what life is like for you, like your family, who
now
are you?
Or growing up?
Let's do with now.
Okay.
Like your family now.
Well, because our kids are all old. They're all in the 30s and 20s, so we're empty nesters. Got 3 grandsons. We got married at a young age and had kids at a young age. So now they're grown. We can do all the things that we weren't able to do when they were, because of them. And they're like, "I wish you would have taken us to Hawaii. Why didn't we go on vacation to Hawaii?" I said, "Because we had you."
I have a 4 and 6-year-old, so I'm at the beginning of that. I got a while.
They're like, "We went camping for vacations." I know, because that's the only thing I could afford.
What was that transition like, being open nesters? Empty nesters, not open nesters.
Empty nesters.
I don't even know what that is.
What was the transition like?
Was it hard?
No, it's not hard. Sometimes some of them wouldn't leave, and then others kept coming back. And you're like, I remember one time my son came back from Jacksonville, and he said, "Dad, you don't look very happy to see me." I said, "I thought you'd be gone longer." So I love it.
So
I love
it's not
the
really
transition.
empty.
Yeah, well, it is now, because we couldn't fit any more people in our camper. So that's how we finally got rid of the last one, is we just decided to sell our home or lose our home, and then there's no home for her to live in, so she's gone too now.
So church is your main thing,
Yeah.
But before we get into that, you got a couple little side projects that you're doing, fishing, things like that. What's that like with life?
Well, I love the outdoors. I mean, I've been an outdoor person all my life. I remember, I tell this story, when I was in kindergarten, and the teacher going, "Okay, after you finish coloring, you can go outside and play." And I went, "I'm done."
It's a cloud.
Yeah, so I always wanted to color in the lines. I didn't want to be that kid who scribbled, but when they said that, I got to go outside.
Yeah, you have to get out there.
Yeah, so I've always been an outdoors person. I love outdoors. We raised our kids outdoors. We did do a lot of camping when they were younger. We had a sailboat. It's still in the family, and we go to the Bahamas or down, somewhere in Florida, and it's an older boat, so it was like camping in a sailboat.
Oh, wow.
So all our kids are in the outdoors, so outdoors is really important. So now that as I'm older and got more spare time, I spend a lot of time fishing, adventure, that kind of stuff.
Camping and
doing that. Yep.
Your little one bed.
Yep.
Camper.
I was staying in a campground this morning. Came from
That's fun.
State park.
You have to have those things outside of church to keep you going. Too many pastors get caught up in being at church 24/7, and they get burnt out. They get fried,
Yep.
And so it's important to have those little side things.
Yeah, and I've been there. I mean, I talked about this Sunday. I think you were in service.
Yes.
I talked about I have addictive personality, and I listed all the things I've been addicted to in my life, and one of them was ministry, because when I became a Christian, I didn't read anything for 2 years but the Bible. I read, and in fact, I read through the New Testament. In the first 2 years of being a Christian, I read through the New Testament once a month for 2 years in different versions. So all the different versions out there, 24, I've read 24 of them.
Wow.
And then I did the same thing with the Old Testament at the same time, but it was 3 times because it's a lot longer.
Yeah.
So I read through, so I was just consumed. So it was no surprise that I ended up in ministry, and ministry was our life. I mean, that's what we did. Yeah. After a while, you get some, I don't want to say balance. I think balance is a wrong word, because that's what people say. Well, I need to balance my life and balance my family and balance my ministry and things like that. I think what the word should be passion. is that you want to have a passion for God and passion for ministry, but a passion for your family and a passion for what you love to do, and let it all kind of just mix together instead of balancing, because balancing suggests that I'm setting guidelines where this area of my life doesn't cross over into this area of my life.
Okay.
And so I've tried to just have passion for everything I do.
That's a great way to describe it, because I've been guilty of that. Like, okay, this much is time is set aside for my kids. We Daisy's getting in the podcast here.
That's my dog.
Yes, Daisy, you're welcome, buddy. We'll get you a mic. But we will. She's fine. She's good. But, set aside them different areas. Like, this part of my day is for church and this part. And actually just met with a pastor, and that's the way he described it. This time's for church and stuff. So to blend all that in a healthy way is probably so much better.
Yeah, I think so. And don't get me wrong, you got to have boundaries.
Right.
I've got 3 of our staff, I got 3 major staff that are on vacation because it's spring break.
Yeah.
And I would never call them. I respect their boundaries.
Their
I want
time.
them to respect mine. But at the same time, if you are looking to, like, I worked for UPS before I became in full-time ministry.
Okay.
I was a driver, and you punch in at 8 o'clock and you punch out whenever. And they never call you on weekends. They never. If you want your boundaries clearly defined, then get a job like that.
Yeah.
If you want clearly defined boundaries, don't get into ministry.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of Sunday, it was probably a different message.
Oh, by the way, happy 420.
And thank you. I was so happy that we were able to do it on this date. It was it worked out really well. But if you're watching this, when we recorded this, it was 420, and the Sunday before you preached a series called Legalize It, and explain a little bit about the series overall.
Okay, so in our mindset, I see how far I should go back here. We do what we call hook series. The times of the years when people go to church, New Year's, Mother's Day, Easter are the big 3 that people come to church. And so what we try to do at Easter is get them to come back. That's a win for us because there's people that just go to Christmas and Easter only. So we'll do a hook series right after Easter. Legalize It was a hook series. We were going to talk about alcohol, weed, and, sex first, alcohol, and then weed.
Yeah.
And we also we thought, 420. That's right then. So let's talk about weed on Sunday, April 18th, because it's right before 420. So we kind of do those hook series to get people to go, I want to hear what he has to say about that. So you came right in the middle. We'd already done the sex one, and so you came.
I did listen to that one, so I would be caught up for this one.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we did the weed one this week, and then next week, this Sunday, we're talking about alcohol.
Now that was, and I want people to understand, because I had this misconception before I listened to the sex one. I was thinking church, Dustin, it's a gimmick series, and I wasn't sold on what was going to be presented. But even if you took weed out of that, that was probably one of the most powerful sermons I've heard on Christian living. And I don't know why we don't always just think of this. It's like somebody invents something and you're like, why did we just invent that? Why wasn't that around forever? But you said something in your series about asking the why. Like, it's not so much is it right or is it wrong, and we're gonna get more into how the church in general looks at things, but the right and the wrong versus looking at why shouldn't we do it? Why are we doing it? What's the reason behind it? And if you want, you can.
Well, the what. We always ask the what questions, or we tend to ask the what question, and what just leads us to the law. What just leads us to the line. I said on Sunday, if you grew up in church, you grew up with somebody else telling you where the lines is. You can't have premarital sex, So the what thing just leads us to the law, and the law is lifeless. The why question leads us towards Jesus, because it starts looking at our heart, and that's where Jesus wants to live, is in our heart, not in our rules.
Right.
And so that's why the why question is so important.
And the problem with the what question is we're humans, and we always look away around the why question. Like, okay, if I'm not allowed doing this, I can do this, and it's not the same thing, but it's close. The why is more, your heart, your desires. And that was such a great sermon.
Thanks.
Like, you definitely talked about weed in it. You definitely talked about, the reasons and, what it does and all the fun stuff. It was a great sermon. It was fun. It was enjoyable. But the truth that came out of it was
Thank you.
was so powerful. I was really impressed. I don't think I ever heard a wheat sermon so good in church. Definitely the first one I ever heard.
The principles apply across the board.
They
The scripture
do.
that we used, I mean, you can use it for anything.
Yeah, me and my wife talked about it for after service and stuff. It was so good. Speaking of that, your series, you've had, I've looked through all your series. You've had The End of the World as We Know It. You've had, was it Yesterday,
Yeah.
the Beatles?
Oh, I love that one.
So my question is, first of all, what is your favorite series you've done?
Oh, that'd be tough. We did a series called That's What She Said. And I really liked. You go, what'd you like about that? Why was your favorite? Because the intro bumpers were the best, versus the content of the message was okay. It was basically a series. It was one of those series where you go, hey, wouldn't it be fun to do a series called this? What would we preach about? Okay, and you figure out what you're going to preach about. So we took women in the Bible that said some powerful things, but the bumper was, what's the guy from The Office? What's his name?
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Yeah, so you'd have Leave It to Beaver lines, and then he'd come in and go, that's what she said, And so you either had a bunch of people laughing in the audience, or people who were like, I don't know. Darlene's dad was like, what did that mean? So that was hilarious. So that was one of my favorite ones that way. As far as my favorite series, we did a bunch of series back in like 2010 called, we did it every January. It's kind of a hook series.
Mm-hmm.
And we used the Who's, like, Who Are You? And
Yeah.
some of their songs every year. And it was, I think it was, one was called Boundaries, Wasted, Censored, and it was all just, hook series dealing with boundaries and stuff like that. Now, we tried to handle this series different than Boundaries. In fact, you even heard me say on Sunday,
Yeah.
I'm not setting the boundaries for you.
Right.
Because then that's all we're doing is we're leading you back to the law. What you've got to do is figure out what's good for you, what's right for you, and through your relationship with Jesus.
Make those decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I can't say it enough. It was a great sermon. Not what I expected at all, but really good.
And you can watch it by going to shorelinechurch.net.
Yes. You can go to their website. You can go to YouTube.
Yeah, we have
I've been
YouTube
watching them on
channel.
YouTube. They have an app. I downloaded the app. The app's really good.
Yep.
With your series, now, I met you and your team 2 years ago at a creative conference.
Oh, yeah, that was 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's we were scheduled to come back last year, but the world got a little crazy, and
That's why
we
it seems
couldn't
like
come
it
back.
was last year, because they
It
canceled
does.
2020. I mean, they canceled the whole year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was.
not the conference.
I still got
The
older
whole year
though.
was canceled.
Yeah, I still got older. I think I should get a year back for that because 42. I'd rather be back at 41. I don't know. It's just a better number.
For sure. I'd rather be back a year ago to 51 as well. Yeah.
So I met you, and I went back in the conversation. You probably don't remember. We met so many people, but the conversation we had, I went back and told my team about it at the church and stuff. And just quick rundown, you were talking about way all the other churches are going to, and this is not what I want to talk about. I'm just talking. But all the other churches are going to campuses and wanting to do more campuses, and you guys are actually doing the opposite. You were coming together, and but the time you took with me to explain all that and talk through that, I was really impressed with, and I shared it with our team because we're getting to the point where we're outgrowing our building, so it's like, what are our next steps? What do we do? And but that was a great conference we came to. Loved it. Loved what we learned. But what me and my wife got most out of that conference didn't come from the conference, came from your team. We met your team, got to get to know several of them, and we just we fell in love with the church and never set foot in a church service, but fell in love with their hearts and your heart and just the passion that you guys have for the community. And, the series you come up with, they have a point, and they're not just you making them up, correct? How does that process go of you guys kind of creating a sermon series?
Well, usually what we do is we get together a year in advance. Like the end of 2020, we got together and start planning out next year, which was hilarious because we did that with 2020 and everything went to
Changed.
yeah, and it was all gone. But so we'll just look. We have some criteria that we look at. Like we have what we call irreducible minimums. I actually got that from a youth pastor at North Point back in the 90s or something.
Okay.
Where his thought process was, we have students for 3 to 6 years. What do we need to say to them in that 3 to 6 years?
Okay.
So you're intentional about what you're saying to people and why. So we've done that as a church, and we have 8 irreducible minimums that we know that need to be talked about on a regular basis.
Every year.
In fact, you heard me mention one on Sunday, authority, because spiritual authority is not something that's even it's counterintuitive to our American culture because we got started by rebelling against, England. So authority is not even culturally relevant or culturally intuitive, and even not taught much in the church. So we find it's a subject that has to be taught on a regular basis. Some of these irreducible minimums have to be taught every year. Relationships, finances, those are kind of things. Because if you get a prayer request, it's usually one of three things: relationship, finances, or health.
Yeah.
So those have to be taught on a regular basis. Some of them we can do every 2 years or, so like that. So we'll look at our irreducible minimums, and then we'll also look at, we try to include a book study. So we have a book study coming up. I say a book study, but a book series coming up after this one, straight out of Corinth.
Yeah, you talked about that Sunday.
Yeah, so we're starting that. It's a 5 weeks where we're not doing the whole book, but we're going through and hitting topics that are in 1st and 2nd Corinthians, kind of on a chronological basis.
Yeah.
So we'll hit baptism, we'll hit communion, things like that. So we'll look at some book studies. We'll also look at pop culture, what's really hot pop culture wise, and then we'll also look at hook series. What can we use hook series? We need
Fun.
January, right after Easter, and most people on Mother's Day have the pastor's wife talk and talks about moms and stuff like that. And you know that Mother's Day, besides Easter, is the most attended service by men all year long. Yeah. So we are like, why would we be super feminine on Mother's Day? Let's honor moms, but if you're super feminine, not what I mean by it's just super flowery.
Yeah.
That's why men don't go to church. So we try to say,
That's
put a
good,
book series right after Mother's Day.
Okay.
So that's what we'll do. We'll kind of look at the whole calendar of the year and start just placing things in, what's coming up, when's spring break, when's this, when's that, what can we, when's 420, now a major thing on a church calendar.
Right. It's amazing though that we're even at that point.
We actually looked for when a 420 would fall on a Sunday, and it was like 7 years from now. We're like, I don't think we can wait that long. So we decided, well, the 18th is on a Sunday, 420 is today. So I don't know what you're going to be doing at 420, but hopefully it's not smoking weed.
You need to watch that sermon. You definitely you will get this a lot more.
You'll probably get some hate letters, but go ahead.
So have you ever had a series where you've just you don't seem like this type, but where you're just like, no, that's too far? Like,
oh, yeah,
it seems
I get
like
shot down all the time.
Do you get shot down?
Yeah, I'm probably the edgiest one.
Right. That's what I was going to say. You probably seem like you'd be the one pushing
Just today we were talking about Mother's Day, and I was like, hear me out, okay? You know how they have drunk history on Comedy Central, right?
Yeah.
And then the rage the last couple of years was doing kids' Bible stories where the kids tell the stories and adults act it out, just like drunk history. What if we did drunk kids Bible stories? And they were like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah, I don't
just
know legally how that would work.
I did say that, but it was a joke. I wasn't really pushing it, but yeah.
Does your wife ever just say, calm down?
No, well, she's had 36 years of this, so she's used to it.
She's used to it, yeah.
You could tell by the eye rolling. Yeah, like
the look on her face when you went too far.
Yeah, I'm not super aware. Like she tells me, you're not socially aware right now. You just offended them. I'm like, I did. So she's the one.
I get that. My wife gets embarrassed really easy. So restaurants for us can be a challenge.
You want to talk about embarrassing? My wife told me, you can dance near me, but not with me. Because you're horrible. So you can dance by me, but I don't want anybody to know that you're actually dancing.
Do you
with
dance
me.
a lot in public?
Not anymore, right? I'm looking at her over there.
That's awesome.
I like to dance. I just feel like sometimes I need to express myself through the art of dance.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
I tried that once and things got broke, so I don't do it anymore. It's not healthy for anybody around me.
Probably wasn't best you were in an antique store. But
that was good. Like a bull on a.
That's right. Exactly what I was saying.
A big bull on a China shop.
China shop would, people would get that, maybe get offended. What do you mean a China shop? That's racist.
So yeah, you can say anything on this show, so it's all good.
Okay.
But on a more serious note, if we can get there. So you reach the community, you live in an area. Now people think Dustin, they think vacation location, they think, paradise. You got the beach, you got white sands, turquoise ocean. What are some challenges you face as a church in Dustin?
That's good question. What are challenges we face in Destin?
I know in my mind, the first thing would be, how do you build a church out of tourists?
Well, you don't build a church out of tourists. we do get tourists here, and I even tell people when I meet them, I'm like, man, props to you. You're going to church on vacation, because I don't do it.
Right.
I was on vacation for a month and didn't go to church, but we were out in the wilderness, so couldn't do it. I've done it before. I've gone to church, but but we'll get tourists here, but that's not, who you're building your church out of. You're just I guess the real challenge is the service industry, because we have so many people that work in the service industry. Once the tourist season starts, you lose a lot of those people. So that creates challenges for us. In other words, it's not so much that we don't have them to serve, but how can we continue to make sure that we're pastoring them? Because if you come here, especially spring break is not necessarily like this, but between Memorial Day and Labor Day, most of our accommodations here are not hotels. They're condos and houses that are vacation rentals.
I'm staying in one right now.
And they rent from Saturday to Saturday. In fact, there's places that will not rent less than that. So what you have is you have a whole group of people turning over on Saturday and checking in on Saturday. So Sunday's the big day. That's when you're getting all your bookings for your umbrellas and chairs. That's when you're getting your charter bookings and all of that. So Sunday's a huge day for the tourist industry. The day that's probably quietest is probably Tuesday. So if you're going to do something to reach the service industry, you have to do. We started something years ago called Church in a Bar over at McGuire's, and it was just so that we could reach people in the service industry, because they actually have a lot of bars will do Tuesday night service industry night, because that's when the other bartenders are off. Hey, come here and get drink specials. So we try to focus on that.
Weekend is kind of a tough
Super
area.
Yep.
And that's when we do church.
Yep. And that's probably the biggest challenge besides the traffic and things like that. Another example would be Saturday night service. Many churches go to a Saturday night service. There's a church in the area that's successful with one. I don't know if we could do it, because the destination wedding business is so big here, and half of our musicians play weddings on Saturday nights. I mean, I do weddings on Saturday nights. So if we had Saturday night service, I couldn't do it. And it's a lot of money. You make a lot of money.
Right.
So that's probably a big challenge.
Good
and
little
it's
income.
all related to the service industry, not so much reaching tourists or keeping tourists, but having to be able to reach your people who can't come on a Sunday.
Yeah. That's good. That's challenges that most of us don't have to face. We don't deal with that. Now, I've watched several of your sermons on YouTube. I've watched, this is only my second time, or actually this is my third time in the building, but I've been to one service. And the one thing that screams out, I think more than anything, is your guys' heart for people. My biggest issue, I've been at church probably since I was, 2 days old.
Really?
My dad's a pastor. He's pastored the same church for now it's probably 38 years. It's the only church he's ever pastored. We've always been a part of the ministry.
Oh, that's cool.
Now, I've had a time frame where I was out of church and, doing what you talked about on Sunday, but mostly I've been in church my whole life. And my biggest issue, being at the age I am now, looking back, is the church always, in general, and I'm not pointing out any specific church or any denomination, but they always expect people, they do church in a way where they expect people to come to where they're at.
Yeah.
They expect people to come in. I know when I was growing up, the big thing was, how you dress coming in the church. And like I said, again, that was across the board. Nowadays, it's how you do church. It's, whether, you're kind of a fun church, whether you do more of the old hymns, whether you that different scenario, but you expect people to come to where you're at instead of going to where they're at. Like, the world's changing, and it seems like the church, no matter who you are, is always like several steps behind in what the world's doing. Now, what I'm not asking is, the truth. The truth is presented the same all the time. You more than prove that through this series, that as a church, you're still going to preach the truth the way the Bible teaches it. But the one thing I noticed about you guys and your staff and the people here is that you go to the people and you present it in a way that they can accept it. Even your seating in your church is designed in a way to make people feel less threatened. It's more, you feel like, I don't know, for me, and like I've been in church my whole life, I'm used to it, but it just felt more welcoming. It felt like I was sitting down with a pastor and having a conversation and stuff. So what are your views on that? Like, how do you go about that, like, to reach people where you're at, where they're at?
Let me give you two on a couple levels. On the big overall level of the Big C church, first of all, COVID has showed us that culturally, expecting people to, I mean, I guess the percentages were people that end up following God. I think it was 75 to 90% did it because someone invited them to his church service on a Sunday morning. That was going to be the most common invitation. And for the most part, all the way up until COVID, and it still might be somewhat true that the people are going to come to God usually coming to church on a Sunday. And even unchurched people expect that's when you go.
Yeah.
But COVID has caused us to shift, absolutely caused us to shift, and a lot of churches successfully shifted, especially the newer ones that kind of grew up in, digital age, have shifted really quick. And now as it's starting to open back up, at least in Florida, I don't know what it's like in Ohio and Michigan, and I know some of those places are still shut down. The tendency is to go back to the way it was and just expect people to come. But I think COVID actually gave people permission to not come anymore.
It did, yes.
So when you open back up, they're not going to be there. So if you don't shift, you're not going to reach them. And the shift is exactly what you're talking about, is going out into and saying, okay, just like we did back in 2008 when we said, hey, once summer hits, our people can't come because they're in the service industry. So what do? We shifted and started church service on a Tuesday night in a bar. That way they could go. I think we have to continue to do that because the cultural norm of Sunday mornings it changed for a little while. It might not ever go back to that. I mean, we're back to Sunday services now. We have 2 services. We used to have 4.
Yeah.
We only have 2 now because people aren't coming back as much. But if we just go back and rely on that, we're going to be even further behind. And so we have to continue to go, okay, how can we shift and reach culture where they are? Now, the second part is personally, because we were portable for 12 years, we were always used to being in the marketplace. But then you work for 12 years, you finally get a building, which the building was a building that I loved because I'd always said...
I want to talk about this too.
When I was a youth pastor in Central Florida, I always told my wife, look, if we're ever senior pastors and we build our own building, I want it to look just like House of Blues or Hard Rock.
Yeah.
And they're both, Hard Rock's way bigger than this one, but they kind of have that same design. Well, this is a nightclub that actually opened when I graduated from high school, and I came to this nightclub a lot. And every time we would drive by, and I'd say, man, if that place ever closes, that make a great church. Well, then it closed, and we're the first one in line, got the building. But there's this thing that happens to a church when you finally get your building and you're portable. You've been portable for 12 years.
Yeah.
Then you get comfortable in there. And then add into the whole COVID thing. I mean, not even COVID, just add into the churches that have been in buildings for years. That's all they've ever known. To shift and go outside is just different for them. Now they know the mandate, go into all the world. So they have to come up with ways, hey, how can we go out into the world and try to talk to people and relate to people and stuff like that. So anyway, you get in the building, you go, the tendency is to go, we finally got there. And to be honest with you, it was great being there. And we had momentum, we grew. But one of the reasons why we grew and had momentum is because we took over an iconic nightclub that everybody in this town had a story about, including me. I mean, I snorted cocaine on a table right up there once. I was here I was here on the stage, this very stage.
Yes.
It was still the same stage.
Now, when you came into this building, you wouldn't change the stage, correct?
We left the stage.
Yeah.
Okay, and I was here, and I watched Joey Ramone kick a guy in the head with his boots right next to me, and his nose exploded. Okay, and that was like in 1983 or 84.
You could do that then.
Yeah. So, the guy was being really obnoxious, and the security dragged him out, threw him out. So this nightclub had this iconic, there's this, the word going around town is, oh my God, do they know what happened in there? That was a nightclub. Ludacris and 50 Cent had a concert there, was full of smoke. I mean, it was just, how could the church, everything from, it's so cool, to how could a church go into this forsaken place and stuff like that. But there was some interest. It picked people's interest. They wanted to come. So that kind of helped our growth. Oh my gosh. And especially if you look around what we did to the building, it looks better than it was when it was a nightclub. Let me tell you.
Beautiful building, yes.
So, but then you get to that point where you're like, this is not where we're supposed to be. It has a great draw, but we can't rely on that for a year or two. It's going to be gone after that, because people wanted to see what it was like. So then we started looking again, and actually COVID pushed us back into it because we started some outdoor services this last year. One was at AJ's.
Some different, not just outdoor services. Like when you think of satellite churches or not like the way you guys did it. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're right.
I want people to know that this is not your typical, people aren't coming to our building. Let's go to the park, or let's
No.
Completely different.
When I talked to you a couple years ago, we didn't have any of those outdoor services yet, or those other services. We were at one campus. We had 2 campuses, plus we had what we called micro campuses. And micro campuses, we had one in a coffee shop out on 30A. We had one at AJ's. We'd done an AJ's one and at McGuire's. And what they are is where you go into a public place and you do a church service. Now, it doesn't look like the same church service. I have to get into some Seth Godin stuff here if I talk about, a meatball Sunday.
Right.
We did a church and a bar on a Tuesday night, and the band didn't do worship songs. They did cover songs that matched the talk, and then would maybe put one worship song. We didn't expect people to stand up. They're sitting there drinking beer and having dinner.
Right.
And just say, and the band leader would go, "Hey, this next song talks about how God's fingerprints are creation. And I don't know where you are with God, but just read the lyrics and maybe, that kind of thing." So it didn't look the same. So we had explored microsites and done that for a while. When I talked to you, we were back to one campus, and we'd gone to 2 campuses because it was really kind of the thing to do. And as a pastor, there's almost a pressure. How big's your church? How many campuses do you have?
Yes.
And it financially almost wrecked us. And I said, we'll never do that again just for the sake of doing it. It has to be big time.
Right.
Well, then COVID caused us, okay, they're opening the churches back up, but not everybody's going to be coming. And even not that everybody's coming, there's actually a cultural response too. Oh, you're so irresponsible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we said, it just kind of came up. It wasn't me. It was all the team. They said, what if we did AJ's again? And we'd always had a dream of doing church at Crab Island. And if you don't know, Crab Island is like a local sandbar right by the bridge. It's a big tourist attraction. You say a sandbar? Yeah, there'll be hundreds of boats out there on the weekends, maybe in the 1,000 on a 4th of July.
Yeah.
And it's huge. I mean, there's vendors out there. They do concerts out there. People go out there and party. And we always thought, hey, in fact, we lose people when the weather gets good, like most churches. You're off on the weekends. So we thought, well, this would be a great time. Everyone wants to be outdoor. We'll do church out there. And when we say church out there, we have like a 150-foot boat that has
I've seen pictures. I'm pretty amazed.
How big is that LED screen? I mean, got to be 50 feet long.
Is that something you rent, or is that churches?
Yeah, they actually do advertising along the beach. When you're sitting there, they'll drive along the beach.
That drive, yeah. Okay.
So we just put our video on there, and it's not a video of the service. It's usually like this. We actually have 2 people. Like, we might take the weed topic, and I'd have the main points, and you would go, oh, yeah, and add in.
Yeah.
And so it's more like people just, because you said, sorry, I'm bouncing around, but
you're fine.
You said earlier it felt like I'm just having a conversation with the pastor.
Yeah.
That's what we discovered during COVID, was we wouldn't do church services. It was more like a podcast, and people feel, oh, conversational. I'm just part of this conversation.
Yes.
So now we've got these outdoor services, and it's really just, it's always been a part of who we are, of trying to be in the marketplace, be in the community, be where people are, because that's where Jesus was. He was in the temple in the first day of the first day of the week on Saturday, but then he was with the people the rest of the week.
Yeah. So getting towards the end of this,
I don't even know about Jesus' ministry.
Hey,
was it Saturday or Sunday? It was the early church was in on Sunday. Yeah.
There's always somebody that will argue. No matter what you say, somebody was going to argue the point. He
was in the synagogue on Saturday.
So not many pastors can relate to some of the issues you deal with here. It's a different kind of area and stuff, but this whole podcast is geared towards just ministers, volunteers, just people in general that work in the church, and they always think, I'm the only one that deals with this. I'm the only one that, can't stand people on Sunday morning, or I'm the only one that gets annoyed by somebody asking me to pray for them every once in a while.
Are you jumping off that thing that I said about relationally it's exhausting to be in ministry?
Yes.
And that's just with my staff. I'm not even talking about you.
Sunday, like that was good.
It's not like that all the time. But I was trying to get a point across.
But that's not where I'm going with
that
this.
If you've ever felt like medicating, a pastor has felt like medicating, because relationally it's a tough job.
It is. And there's things that pastors and, like I said, even nursery workers deal with that they hold inside. They don't get out because we're not supposed to feel this way. We're not supposed to, not like to take care of kids one Sunday, even though we're over the nursery.
Yeah.
Or even you can get deeper, even in depression and things like that. But what I want to ask you is all the pastors out there that live in, I come from a farming community. For us, the big deal is like, it's hard for us to do like events through the week or on Sunday, big events, when it's time for the crop to come in.
Yeah.
Because that's how they make their living. We can't schedule things for that. There's been churches that have went through splits because they tried to do something on that and they lost all their, farmers. So no matter what the community is, what is, in your opinion, the main thing you need to focus on when you're reaching your community?
That's a good question. Because the first thing that comes to my mind when you say something like that, I go, wow, I would have never thought about that with the farmer.
Right.
And if I would have planted a church in Ohio, Illinois, or somewhere, I'd be like, oh, I don't know. Jesus said to understand the times and the seasons in which, was it Jesus? Yeah. Understand the times and seasons in which you live. That was actually, it was talking about the sons of Issachar understood the times and seasons. Jesus said, you understand what the weather's going to do, but you don't know the season you're living in. You don't know. But the sons of Issachar understood the times and the seasons, which means there's two different things. There's seasons are cyclical, and we need to understand our season, just like you understand farming. If you came and planted a church here,
I wouldn't have a clue.
And you didn't know about fishing, you didn't know about tourist industry, you do something and go, hey, I wouldn't do that. I might tell you that. But also times, and that's more of COVID. We've moved into a new time. After 9/11 was a new time. It's not cyclical. Things are changing, and they're never going back. After 9/11, things are changing, they're never going back. So what was the question again? So about planting the seasons?
Just pastors that are out there that are trying to reach their community, no matter like what they're dealing with, whether it's farming, whether it's, out here with the tourist industry and people serving and stuff. What's a piece of advice you could get to help them?
Wow, I just think just understanding your community.
Yeah.
We just my wife and I took 33 days on vacation and went out west and camped for a month, which most wives would never do that. And I was telling Darlene, I was like, I can't believe how many cowboy churches there are. And I'd heard of cowboy church, when I first
What is a cowboy church?
A cowboy church is a church that's geared towards cowboys. And I don't know where the first one, do you know where the first one started, Darlene? But I remember reading it somewhere in, like Relevant Magazine or some podcast or blog or something about cowboy church, reaching cowboys. And so when I first saw the first sign out west, I like, oh, is that cowboy church I read about? But then I kept seeing them everywhere and realized that they're doing the same thing. They're going, okay, we're dealing with a certain type of people that live on ranches and work on ranches. So how can we best meet, not only attract them, but how can we pastor them? I think that needs to be the main question that you ask along the why. If you move into a community, why wouldn't it work if I did an event here during this time?
Yeah.
Well, because it's harvest. Really? How can we help them?
That's good.
How can we pastor them? How can we assist them? We've got a thing starting called Grub Club, where we're feeding the people that work on the docks because they work 14-hour days and they can't get away. Because we're asking the question, well, they can't go to church, how can we help them? So I might ask those questions about why the seasons running the way they do, why they work, and then how can you assist, how can you bless and pastor people where they are?
Just loving people with the environment they're in and what they're doing. Man, thank you so much for sitting with me today.
It's over already?
Yes, it goes by so quick.
Oh my gosh, you just make me feel so comfortable as a host, and I just want to say what an honor it is to be.
You realize you're not getting paid right?
Oh, well, listen, it's time to go. No, I do want to say what an honor it is. Thanks for Daisy. Can you see the adults are talking? What an honor it is to be able to be on here. But you do a good job. You got a good voice. You got a good. It's a good setup you got here as far as making me feel comfortable, and I appreciate that.
My wife said it'd be even better if I just lost the camera, if it was only my voice and not all of this.
Oh my God!
No, she didn't really say that. She's a sweetheart.
No, but that's what you think, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, but that's what she meant. I like, you can read your wife's face. I can read mine.
But if anyone appreciates self-defecating humor, no, self-depreciating.
Yeah.
Sorry, wrong one. I guess everybody self-defecates, but if anyone appreciates that kind of humor, I do.
That was amazing. Now I've lost where I'm at. I get in trouble for that at our church because I make fun of myself a little too much sometimes. But somebody's having fun.
I know.
I really do want to thank you for sitting down with me.
Sure.
I'm sitting with one of your staff on Thursday and talking to them, and I'm really excited about that. She was like the first one to pop in my head when I was like, we're going to Destin. I told my wife, I was like, I have to sit down with Whitney and talk to her just about her life and ministry and what that looks like.
That's awesome.
And stuff. And I was like, I think I'm going to message the pastor. And I was like, I don't know if he would actually sit down with me or not. Because I'd only met you one time and stuff. And my wife's like, hey, it don't hurt to ask. And, you didn't hesitate. And I really appreciate that.
Well, I looked at your work and I was like, this guy looks like he's legit. Maybe I can promote myself on this thing. I think I'll do this. But now I've met you, I realize you're not.
Yeah, promotion can be very deceiving sometimes.
No, self-promoting. You'd be like, oh my gosh, we used to run this summer camp, and it was huge. Youth groups from all over Florida would come, even other states, and I had somebody come visit us, and he got in our office, and they're like, this is it? And it was like as big as this thing. They go, it looks so much bigger. I'm like, yeah, that's what social media will do for you.
Well, in closing, I want to ask you to pray, and I want to focus kind of on, it's Tuesday right now. The pastor he just had church service on Sunday, and, the crowd wasn't what he thought it was going to be. That kind of letdown you feel after a Sunday service, whether it was a great service or not. Sometimes on Monday and Tuesday, it's just that low that you go through from the hype. But the pastor that's struggling because he's trying to reach his community, he's trying to figure out where they are, and he's just, it's just not hit that stride yet. And just pray for them and bless them.
Prayer wasn't on the list you sent me, so I'm going to have to ask my wife to come up here and say that prayer.
She's more than welcome to.
You didn't say I was going to have to pray.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Father, we thank you so much for, God, you're just your promises, that we can stand upon your promises. Lord, I'm just thinking about exactly what you described, Tim. Somebody out there may be discouraged, or maybe not even discouraged, just you get that post-sermon blues, whatever it is, post-sermon depression or whatever it is. Lord, I thank you for the calling that weighs so big on our life. I thank you for the calling that is just like the big billboard that propels us on. I think about Jesus, that we're supposed to keep our eyes on because he's the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. Lord, that you endured so much because of the prize. God, I thank you that we can run that race that you've set before us. And we take our eyes off of ourselves and we put our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, and that the race that you've called us, that we are striving for the race that you've called us. And Lord, that you've not sent us in without your presence, that you've not asked us to do something that you haven't done or that you haven't equipped us to do. And so, Lord, I thank you for just even right now, there's someone listening that there's just that overwhelming sense of hope, overwhelming sense of just that you are with them no matter what fire they've gone through. And God, that we would just continue to keep our eyes, and I put myself in this, I never want to forget where I came from. I never want to forget that except by the grace of God, there go I. And Lord, that we'd always remember that we are just basically trophies of your grace, and that there are people out there that need to hear what you have placed in these men and women, that you have sent them there for just such a time as this, and that they are there for a reason, and that what you've put in them will bring life to everyone that they minister to. Maybe they don't see it right away, but Lord, I thank you that in due season they shall reap if they do not lose heart. Lord, we thank you for just being with them, encouraging them. And Lord, I also thank you for people like Tim to be around them, see that they're not alone, because I know the enemy would like to isolate them, but Lord, that you're there with them. Lord, we love you and praise you in Jesus' name. And Lord, I pray for this podcast. I thank you for opening doors for Tim and his wife, God, that, that they would listen to your voice, and if they're supposed to move to no, I'm sorry. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Hey, thank you. What's your website again?
For the church, shorelinechurch.net.
And is it the Fishy Kid?
Fishy the Kid is my Instagram. It's all basically my outdoor stuff.
Yes.
There's not much ministry on it. We do have on my Facebook.
There's not ministry on fishing?
There is. I have a long story behind that. I'll tell you sometime.
But go to shoreline.net.
Shorelinechurch.net.
And
we have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter,
YouTube,
all that kind of stuff.
It's all on there.
TikTok. I'm a TikTok sensation.
So if you're a church and you just need inspiration, look at their Instagram account. Some of the graphics and series titles and things your team comes up with will inspire you to upgrade your church Instagram and your just your graphics and everything.
And Awakening TV just did a
Yes.
a documentary on us. So if you want to check that out, you can actually get. And I'm not saying, oh, look at us, we got a documentary.
Now it's Awakening, but it's AWKNG.
Yeah. Because there's a couple other awakenings out there.
I know. I fell into that trap.
Yeah. I
and
became a
good.
Buddhist when I was looking for it. So AWKNG TV.
Yes.
Yeah. And they did it. It's just, I only send you there because it just gives you a heart. Talk about the heart of what we do.
Yes. Great church. If you're in Destin, stop by here at Shoreline Church and find us, The Only Jesus Podcast, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube.
This is The Only Jesus Podcast?
Yes.
Wow. I
because
thought there would be a lot more.
only Jesus can handle. This is the only one.
That's the name of it.
Yeah.
Only Jesus.
It's a catch, but we're The Only Jesus Podcast.
We should name our church Only Church, and then we can go, we're the only church in Destin.
Or the first, you can be the first Shoreline Church of Destin.
Yeah.
All right.
We just added 10 minutes onto this.